The day my parents' will was read changed everything. One moment I was sitting there, watching my brother inherit a fortune, the next moment a secret emerged that would transform not just my life, but the lives of countless others. Nobody knew what was coming, especially not my brother. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The conference room at Blackwell Associates smelled like furniture polish and expensive cologne. Rain tapped against the tall windows like impatient fingers, creating a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I sat at the far end of the oval mahogany table, directly across from my older brother Daniel. At 38, he looked every bit the successful businessman in his tailored navy suit and designer watch that caught the light whenever he gestured. He'd always been my parents' pride: Harvard Business School, executive position at a tech firm, perfect wife, 2 photogenic children. I fiddled with the sleeve of my department store blazer, feeling underdressed despite my best efforts. At 34, I was the family's designated disappointment, the one who'd abandoned a promising career in finance to teach art at an underfunded public high school. The decision had created a rift with my parents that never fully healed. Our family attorney, Harrison Walsh, stood at the head of the table, his silver hair meticulously combed, his posture military straight despite being well into his 70s. He'd handled my family's legal affairs for over 3 decades. Mom and Dad had trusted him implicitly. Shall we begin? Harrison's voice was rich and measured, the kind that commanded jury attention during his courtroom days. He adjusted his reading glasses and opened a leather portfolio. The accident had been sudden: a rainy night, a truck driver who fell asleep at the wheel, my parents' car in the wrong place at the wrong moment. Both gone instantly. 2 weeks had passed, but the shock still hadn't worn off. We'd moved through the funeral in a daze, accepting condolences from people whose names I couldn't remember. Now we sat in this sterile room, waiting to divide what remained of Thomas and Elizabeth Mitchell. The thought made my stomach turn. As you know, Harrison began, your parents updated their will annually. This version was finalized just 3 months ago. He cleared his throat. I'll begin with the standard legal preamble. Daniel nodded importantly, as if he were in a board meeting. My sister-in-law Victoria sat beside him, her caramel highlights perfectly arranged, her expression appropriately solemn. Their children were at home with a nanny. I sat alone. My boyfriend Seth had offered to come, but something told me this was a journey I needed to make by myself. Now I wished for his hand to hold. Harrison read through the legal terminology, words flowing together in a stream of heretofores and aforementions. I caught my mother's cousin Agnes stifling a yawn from her corner of the table. 2 of my father's business partners nodded gravely at appropriate intervals. Then came the substance. To my son, Daniel Thomas Mitchell, Harrison read, I leave our primary residence at 47 Lakeside Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects contained therein. Daniel's expression didn't change. He'd been expecting this. The house was worth at least $3 million. Additionally, I leave to Daniel my entire investment portfolio currently managed by Gramercy Partners, all interests in Mitchell Development Group, and the sum of $4 million to be transferred upon the execution of this will. A murmur rippled around the table. Victoria squeezed Daniel's arm. He nodded slightly, accepting this windfall as if it were merely his due. Harrison continued. To my daughter, Olivia Elizabeth Mitchell. I sat up straighter, my heart suddenly loud in my ears. I leave the sum of $10,000 and my collection of art books. The silence that followed felt tangible. $10,000. After a lifetime. And some books. I blinked rapidly, determined not to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Victoria coughed delicately into her hand. I could feel eyes on me, some pitying, some curious, some uncomfortable. Daniel studied his manicured fingernails. Is that? I started, then stopped. My voice sounded strange, hollow. Is that all? Harrison glanced up, his expression professional but with a hint of discomfort. For now, yes. There are some charitable donations that follow. I nodded mechanically. Of course. My parents had always been generous donors to the Symphony, the art museum, Daniel's alma mater. I'd never expected an equal split, that would have been naive given our family dynamics, but this felt like a final statement, a posthumous confirmation of where I stood. The rest of the reading blurred. Harrison's voice continued, detailing bequests to organizations, instructions for memorial scholarships, final wishes. I stared at the grain of the table, tracing the whorls with my eyes, focusing on the physical world to stay grounded. When Harrison closed the portfolio, Daniel stood and shook his hand firmly. Thank you for handling this so efficiently, he said, as if complimenting a subordinate on a well-executed presentation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria was already on her phone, presumably texting the nanny. The business partners clapped Daniel on the shoulder. Agnes approached me, her expression a mask of performative sympathy. "Oh, honey," she said, patting my hand. "You know your mother always said you were so independent. You never needed much." That word. Independent. The family euphemism for, we don't need to worry about Olivia. I'd heard it my entire life. "Thanks, Agnes," I said, withdrawing my hand. "I should go." I gathered my purse and stood to leave. No one tried to stop me. Actually, Harrison's voice cut through the murmurs. "If everyone could give us the room, there's a separate matter I need to discuss with Ms. Mitchell." Daniel paused, his eyebrows lifting slightly. "Both of us?" "Just Olivia," Harrison said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Daniel's eyes narrowed fractionally. "Well, I need to get back to the office anyway. Liv, call if you need anything." He never waited for my response to such offers. The room emptied quickly. Victoria's perfume lingered in the air, expensive and cloying. When the door closed, the sudden quiet felt like pressure against my eardrums. Harrison remained standing, watching me with an unreadable expression. He waited until the footsteps in the hallway faded completely. "Please sit back down, Olivia." I sank into the chair, suddenly exhausted. "I don't understand." Harrison walked to a side table and poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter. He placed one in front of me before sitting adjacent to my position. "Your parents left additional instructions," he said, setting his portfolio aside and removing a sealed envelope from his inner jacket pocket. "Private instructions." My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for my water glass. "What do you mean?" "Thomas and Elizabeth created a separate document, to be delivered only to you. And only after the official will reading was complete." He placed the envelope on the table between us. My name was written across the front in my mother's elegant handwriting. "Why the secrecy?" I asked. Harrison leaned back in his chair. For the first time, his professional demeanor softened slightly. "I've been your family's attorney for 32 years, Olivia. In that time, I've learned that families are complex. Your parents had their reasons." I stared at the envelope, fear and curiosity battling within me. Is Daniel going to contest whatever this is? Should I be calling a lawyer of my own? Harrison shook his head. "That won't be necessary. What's in that envelope isn't part of the estate that was just distributed. It's separate, and completely legal. Daniel has no claim on it whatsoever." My mouth felt dry despite the water. "What is it?" "I think your parents should explain," he said, nodding toward the envelope. "Take your time. I'll give you privacy." He stood and walked to the door. "Harrison," I called as his hand touched the doorknob. "How long have you known about this?" He paused. "They set this up 8 years ago. Right after your gallery show. In Brooklyn." The door closed behind him before I could respond. 8 years ago. Right after I'd left my job at Merrill Lynch to pursue teaching. Right after the biggest fight I'd ever had with my father. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. I broke the seal carefully and removed several folded pages. The first was a letter, written in my mother's hand. "Dearest Olivia," it began. "If you're reading this, then your father and I are gone, and you've just sat through what must have been an extremely painful reading. For that, we are truly sorry." I paused, my breath catching. I could hear her voice in the words. "By now, you're wondering why we seem to have left everything to your brother. The answer is complicated, and perhaps not what you expect. It's not because we loved you less. It's because we understood you more than you realized." I blinked, a tear splashing onto the paper. I quickly dabbed it away, afraid of smudging the ink. 8 years ago, when you left finance to pursue teaching, your father was furious. Not because he thought you were making a mistake, though that's what he told you. He was afraid. Afraid you were rejecting everything he'd built, everything he thought would keep you safe. He couldn't see that you were building something different, something he couldn't measure in dividends and returns. I remembered that fight in excruciating detail. Dad's reddened face, his voice rising as he demanded to know how I could throw away a career that people would kill for. Me, standing my ground for perhaps the first time in my life, telling him that making money for the already wealthy was killing my soul. "Your father couldn't express it, but he came to respect your choice. We both did. We watched from a distance as you transformed students' lives, as you built a life of purpose rather than profit. We were proud, Olivia, even if we didn't know how to tell you." My hands shook. This contradicted everything I'd believed for nearly a decade. I'd assumed their silence was disapproval, their distance was disappointment. Daniel needs what we left him in the will. Not financially, he makes more than enough money. He needs it emotionally. His sense of worth has always been tied to achievement, to outward signs of success. Without the validation of inheritance, he would feel we had rejected him. You are stronger than that. You always have been. I glanced at the other pages in the envelope. They appeared to be legal documents, but I continued with the letter first. What you'll find with this letter is documentation of a trust we established in your name. We called it the Phoenix Trust, after that painting you did in college, the one that hangs in our bedroom. The one your father would look at every night before he went to sleep. I covered my mouth with my hand. I'd never known Dad had paid any attention to that painting. He'd never mentioned it. The trust contains $12. 8 million. It's been managed separately from our other investments, through a firm in Boston. Your father was quite pleased with its performance. Here, I could almost see my mother's wry smile. Dad had always been most animated when discussing investment returns. Additionally, the trust holds the deed to the cabin in Vermont and ownership of Horizon Gallery in Manhattan. You probably didn't know we owned it. We purchased it anonymously 7 years ago when the original owner was facing bankruptcy. We knew how much you loved that space. Horizon Gallery. The place that had given me my first show. The place that displayed work from my most talented students each spring. I'd always been grateful to the owner, Diane, for her support. I had no idea my parents were behind it. You're free to use these resources however you wish. If you want to continue teaching, do that. If you want to open your own school, do that. The only guidance we'll offer is this: your father and I spent too many years building wealth and not enough using it for things that matter. Don't make the same mistake. The final paragraph made my tears flow freely. We should have told you all this while we were alive. That failure is our greatest regret. We got caught in patterns we couldn't break, roles we couldn't shed. But know this, Olivia, you were never the disappointment. You were the brave one. You were the one who dared to define success on your own terms. In that way, you were always your father's daughter. It was signed by both of them, my mother's elegant script alongside my father's blocky signature. I sat motionless, the letter in my lap, tears streaming down my face. Through the windows, I could see the rain had stopped. Sunlight was breaking through the clouds, casting prisms on the conference table through crystal water glasses. After what might have been minutes or hours, a gentle knock came at the door. Harrison entered quietly, carrying a box of tissues which he placed beside me without comment. He sat across from me, waiting. Did you know what was in this? I finally asked, my voice hoarse. Not the personal content, he said. But I structured the trust. It's quite solid. Why didn't they ever tell me? Harrison considered this carefully. Your parents were complicated people, Olivia. Brilliant in many ways, but not always emotionally articulate. I think they found it easier to make arrangements than to have conversations. I laughed softly, the sound somewhere between amusement and grief. That sounds exactly right. What will you do now? He asked. I looked down at the letter, at the trust documents. Beside it. I don't know yet. But I need to ask you something first. Of course. Daniel, I said. Should I tell him? Harrison leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. That's entirely your decision. Legally, you have no obligation to disclose anything about the Phoenix Trust. It was created outside the estate intentionally. But ethically? His eyes, gray and experienced, met mine directly. In my experience, money rarely solves relational problems. It often exacerbates them. Your brother received exactly what your parents intended him to receive. Whether you share information about your separate trust depends on what kind of relationship you want with him going forward. I nodded, gathering the papers and carefully returning them to the envelope. Thank you, Harrison. For everything. One more thing, he said as I stood to leave. There's a safety deposit box at First Meridian Bank. The key is in that envelope. As well. Your mother said it contains the things words couldn't say. I don't know what that means, but I suspect you might. Outside, the air felt different, charged somehow. I walked past my sensible Honda Civic in the parking lot and kept walking, needing movement, needing to feel the city around me. My phone buzzed in my purse, probably Daniel, wondering what the mysterious meeting had been about. I didn't answer. Instead, I found myself in a small park 3 blocks away, sitting on a bench, watching children play while their parents checked emails on nearby benches. Life continuing, as it always does. I thought about my classroom at Westside High, with its inadequate supplies and leaking ceiling tiles. I thought about my students, especially the ones who reminded me of myself at their age, bursting with creativity but unsure if they were allowed to prioritize it. I thought about all the grants I'd written that had been rejected, all the programs I'd tried to start without funding. And for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine what might be possible now. My mother's words echoed, "You're free to Use these resources however you wish. Freedom. It felt strange, exhilarating, terrifying. I pulled out my phone, bypassing Daniel's texts, and called the one person I wanted to share this with. Seth? It's me. You're not going to believe what just happened. 3 days later, I stood in the lobby of First Meridian Bank, the safety deposit box key clutched in my hand. The trust documents had been overwhelming enough. I'd spent hours with a financial advisor Harrison had recommended, beginning to understand the scope of what my parents had created. But this key, this represented something different. Something personal. The bank manager escorted me to the vault, her heels clicking on the marble floor. After checking my identification and paperwork, she unlocked the outer door of box number 782. And left me alone in the private viewing room. I inserted my key with trembling fingers. Inside the box was a collection of items that didn't immediately make sense together: a small velvet jewelry box, a USB drive, a leather-bound journal I recognized as my mother's, and a manila envelope with "For Olivia" written across the front. I started with the envelope. Inside was a stack of newspaper and magazine clippings. I spread them across the table, confused at first, until I realized they were all about me. A small article from a local paper about an art program I'd started for at-risk youth. A photograph from an education magazine showing me with students at a gallery opening. A mention in an alumni newsletter about a teaching award I'd received 2 years ago. They had been following my career all along, collecting evidence of my life like precious artifacts. The jewelry box contained my grandmother's sapphire ring, the one Mom always wore, the one I'd admired since childhood. Beneath it was a note. In her handwriting, for when you're ready to wear something impractical and beautiful. The USB drive contained hundreds of photographs, many I'd never seen before. Me as a child, paint-smeared and beaming. Me at college art shows. But most surprisingly, photos of my parents at my gallery openings, events I hadn't known they'd attended. They must have come and left without approaching me, watching from a distance, unwilling or unable to bridge the gap they'd helped create. My mother's journal was the most difficult to face. I hesitated before opening it, feeling like an intruder. But the first page contained a note: "Olivia, some things are easier to write than to say. I hope these pages help you understand." I read for hours, losing track of time in the windowless room. The journal wasn't a daily record but rather reflections, started around the time I'd left finance. My mother wrote about her own abandoned dreams of becoming a writer, about how she'd allowed practicality to override passion. She wrote about my father's complicated pride in me, his fear that my choices would lead to hardship, his inability to separate love from protection. And she wrote about their decision to create the Phoenix Trust, to give me freedom without strings. But only after they were gone, because they didn't trust themselves not to meddle, not to try to control how I used it. The final entry was dated just a month before the accident. "Thomas agreed today that we should tell Olivia everything while we're still here. It's time to stop hiding behind legal documents and start having real conversations. We'll invite her to dinner next week. It's long overdue." That dinner invitation had never come. When I finally emerged from the bank, the afternoon light was fading. My phone rang. Daniel again. This time, I answered. "Liv? Finally. What happened after the will reading? Walsh wouldn't tell me anything." I hesitated. "It was private, Daniel." "Private? There's no private in family estates. Whatever it is, I should know about it. I'm handling all the financial arrangements." The old Olivia would have apologized, would have tried to smooth things over. But something had shifted. "Not everything is yours to handle, Daniel. Mom and Dad left something for me alone. That's all you need to know." His silence spoke volumes. When he finally responded, his voice was tight. "Is this about money? Did they leave you something separately?" "Because that seems, it's not about the money," I interrupted, though of course, in some ways it was. "It's about trust. It's about seeing someone for who they are." "What does that even mean?" His frustration was palpable. "It means I need some time. I'm still processing everything." "Processing what?" "Liv, you're not making sense." I sighed. "I know. I'm sorry. I'll call you in a few days, okay? Give my love to Victoria and the kids." I ended the call before he could protest further. For once, Daniel would have to wait for answers. For once, his need to know everything wouldn't be my priority. That evening, I spread everything from the safety deposit box across my living room floor. Seth brought takeout and sat cross-legged beside me, listening as I tried to make sense of it all. "They were proud of me," I said, still finding the concept hard to believe. "All this time, they were proud." Seth squeezed my hand. "Of course they were. How could they not be? But they never said it. Not once in 8 years." "Some people can't say the most important things," he said gently. doesn't mean they don't feel them. I picked up a clipping about the mural project my students had completed in the city's children's hospital. My father had written, "This is what matters," in the margin. I wish we'd had more time, I whispered. I wish we'd found a way to talk. Seth nodded. I know. But maybe they found a way to listen, even if they couldn't find the words to respond. I leaned against him, exhausted by grief and revelation. What am I going to do with all this money, Seth? It doesn't feel real. You don't have to decide everything tonight, he said. But I know you. You've been dreaming about possibilities your whole life. Now you can make some of them real. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother's journal. About the gallery they'd secretly purchased, about the students whose lives I'd touched with such limited resources. What could be possible now? I got up and went to my small home office, pulled out a notebook, and began to write. Not plans, exactly. Dreams. Possibilities. Questions. By morning, I had filled 20 pages. 3 months later, I stood in what was becoming the headquarters of the Phoenix Foundation. We'd leased a spacious loft in a converted warehouse in South Boston, high ceilings, exposed brick, and windows that filled the space with natural light. Construction crews were finishing interior walls for offices and meeting spaces, while a local artist was painting a mural spanning the entry wall, a stylized phoenix rising against a backdrop of city skylines merging into mountain landscapes. What do you think of the color in the conference room? Seth asked, joining me by the windows. He'd taken a leave of absence from his architecture firm to help launch the foundation, his expertise proving invaluable as we renovated both this space and the Vermont property. It's perfect, I said, admiring the warm terracotta shade. Not corporate, not institutional. It feels alive. He smiled, slipping an arm around my waist. Like everything else about this place. In just 3 months, the Phoenix Foundation had evolved from concept to reality with startling speed. The legal and financial infrastructure was in place, thanks to a team of professionals Harrison had helped me assemble. We'd developed our mission statement, established priorities, and begun building partnerships with schools, community organizations, and arts institutions. My phone buzzed, a text from Jasmine Chen, the educational consultant I'd hired as our first full-time employee. A former school administrator with a background in arts integration, she brought credibility and connections. That complemented my classroom experience. Meeting with Westside principal confirmed for tomorrow at 10. He's excited about the pilot program. I smiled, typing a quick acknowledgement. Westside High School, where I'd taught until taking leave to establish the foundation, would be our first partner in what we were calling the Phoenix Pathways program. We would provide funding for expanded arts education, professional development for teachers, artist residencies, and direct support for students showing promise in creative fields. Olivia, called a voice from the entrance. The signage people are here with samples. That was Marcus, our operations manager, a recent MBA graduate with a background in nonprofit administration and a passion for efficiency. He'd been skeptical when I'd insisted our logo incorporate actual gold leaf accents, but had come around when he saw the design. Coming! I called back, giving Seth's hand a quick squeeze before heading toward the entrance. The next few hours passed in a blur of decisions, signage options, furniture deliveries, technology installations. By late afternoon, I needed a break from the constant stimulation. I slipped out and walked to a small park 2 blocks away, finding an empty bench where I could gather my thoughts. The pace of change in my life over the past months was sometimes overwhelming. I'd gone from a high school teacher with a modest apartment and constant financial stress to the head of a multi-million-dollar foundation with a team of employees and ambitious goals. The transition wasn't always smooth. I still sometimes felt like an imposter, waiting for someone to call me out, to question my qualifications or judgment. But alongside the anxiety came moments of exhilarating clarity. In those moments, I could see the potential impact of what we were building, not just a grant-making entity, but a catalyst for systemic change in how arts education was valued and implemented. My phone rang, Daniel's name appearing on the screen. Our relationship had evolved too, tentatively rebuilding on more equal footing. The process wasn't without tension, but there was a new willingness on both sides to move beyond old patterns. Hey, I answered. How's the Tokyo deal going? Signed this morning, he said, satisfaction evident in his voice. Which is why I'm calling. I'm back in Boston tonight. Would you and Seth like to have dinner? Victoria's still in Connecticut with the kids, visiting her parents. We'd love to, I said, genuinely meaning it. The usual place at 7? Perfect. And Liv, I want to hear about the Vermont renovations. I've been thinking about what you said, about making it a retreat center. I might have some contacts who could help with the sustainable energy systems you're interested in. This was new, Daniel offering professional assistance without being asked. That would be fantastic. Seth has been working with an environmental engineer, but more expertise is always welcome. Great. See you tonight. As I walked back to the foundation offices, I reflected on how Daniel's attitude had shifted. Initially defensive about my inheritance, he'd gradually become supportive, even enthusiastic. He'd made a substantial personal donation to the foundation's launch, insisting it remain anonymous. "This isn't about me getting credit," he'd said, surprising me. The workday continued with a video call with Diane from Horizon Gallery, who was helping establish our artist residency program. Then a meeting with our web designer to review the almost completed website, and finally a session with our grant writer to discuss upcoming funding opportunities to supplement the foundation's endowment. By the time Seth and I arrived at the restaurant to meet Daniel, I was mentally exhausted but buzzing with creative energy. The restaurant was one of Boston's oldest steakhouses, with dark wood paneling and leather booths, traditionally Daniel's kind of place, not mine, but the neutral territory served us well. Daniel was already at the table, nursing a scotch. He stood when he saw us, greeting Seth with a firm handshake and me with a brief hug, another new development in our evolving relationship. "You look tired," he said as we sat down. "Thanks a lot," I replied dryly. He laughed. "Not in a bad way. Productive tired. I recognize it, it's how I feel after closing a major deal." "The foundation is definitely keeping us busy," Seth acknowledged. Daniel signaled for the waiter. "Then you both need a good meal and some excellent wine. My treat tonight, we're celebrating the Tokyo deal and the Phoenix launch." Throughout dinner, I found myself watching Daniel with new eyes. He asked thoughtful questions about the foundation's programs, listening attentively to the answers. When Seth described the challenges of retrofitting the Vermont studio with state-of-the-art technology while preserving its rustic character, Daniel offered practical suggestions drawn from his own experience with property development. "You know," Daniel said as we were finishing dessert, "I was thinking about something Mom used to say when we were kids. Remember how she always told us we were two sides of the same coin?" I nodded. It had been one of her favorite phrases. When trying to reconcile our differences. "I never really understood what she meant," he continued. "I thought it was just something parents say. But lately, I've been wondering if she saw something we didn't." "What do you mean?" I asked. "We approach things differently, you through creativity and intuition, me through analysis and strategy. But maybe those approaches are complementary, not opposing." Seth smiled. "That sounds right to me. I've watched Olivia build this foundation, there's plenty of strategy alongside the vision." Daniel nodded. "And I'm learning there's value in approaches I used to dismiss. The Tokyo deal succeeded largely because we incorporated design thinking. Principles that would have seemed too soft to me a few years ago." After dinner, as we walked to our cars, Daniel hung back slightly to speak to me privately. "I've been thinking about the Vermont property," he said. "About our summers there. As kids. What about them? They were good times, weren't they? Before everything got complicated?" I considered this. They were simple. Connected. "I'd like my kids to experience something similar," he said. "Not the same exactly, but I don't want them to grow up thinking success only looks one way." The statement surprised me. "I'd love to have them visit when the retreat center is operational. We're planning family programs during school breaks. I'd like that." He hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about what you said, about Mom and Dad seeing us differently, giving us what they thought we needed. I'm starting to think they were wiser than we gave them credit for." I smiled. "I think so too." The next morning, I arrived at the foundation offices early, enjoying the quiet before everyone else arrived. I sat at my desk, reclaimed wood, locally sourced, and opened my mother's journal, which had become a kind of touchstone. I often read a few entries when facing important decisions, finding guidance in her reflections. Today I turned to an entry I'd read several times before, watching Olivia with her students yesterday. From a distance, she didn't see me. The way she listened to that struggling boy, drawing him out instead of shutting him down. Thomas would have managed the situation differently, efficiently, effectively, but perhaps missing the heart of it. Olivia has always seen the people behind the problems. I wonder what she could accomplish with real resources behind that vision. Now I was finding out. The day was packed with meetings, first with Jasmine and the Westside principal, finalizing details of our pilot program. Then with a potential donor who was interested in funding our digital arts initiative. In the afternoon, a working session with our program team to develop evaluation metrics that would capture meaningful outcomes beyond the usual statistics. By late afternoon, I needed to clear my head. I told Marcus I was taking a walk and would Be back for our final meeting with the marketing team at 4. Instead of the nearby park, I found myself walking toward my old apartment building. I hadn't been back since moving to a larger place closer to the foundation offices. My former studio apartment had been my home for 8 years, cramped but cozy, with excellent natural light for painting and a landlord who tolerated the occasional splatter of acrylic on the bathroom sink. The building looked exactly the same, 3 stories of weathered brick, window boxes with geraniums on the first floor, the same cracked step at the entrance. I stood across the street, not wanting to go in but feeling a strange need to acknowledge this piece of my history. Ms. Mitchell? Is that you? I turned to see Tanya Washington, one of my former students from Westside. Now a freshman in college. She'd been part of my advanced art class 2 years earlier, talented but struggling with confidence. Tanya. How are you? How's RISD? She'd won a partial scholarship to Rhode Island School of Design, a major achievement. It's amazing, she said, her face lighting up. Hard, but amazing. I'm home visiting my mom this weekend. She gestured toward my old building. You live around here? I used to, I said. Just taking a walk down memory lane. Tell me about your classes. As Tanya enthusiastically described her first-year projects, I felt a surge of pride. She'd blossomed from a hesitant high school student into a confident young artist finding her voice. This was why I'd taught, for transformations like hers. Oh, she exclaimed suddenly. I saw the article about your foundation in the Globe. That's incredible, Ms. Mitchell. Will you be working with Westside? That's the plan. We're starting a pilot program there next semester. Her eyes widened. My brother's a sophomore there now. He's into digital art, makes these amazing animations on his phone. But there's no real program for that kind of thing. There will be soon, I promised. Digital arts is one of our focus areas. In fact, I paused, an idea forming. Would you be interested in being part of our student advisory committee? We need the perspective of recent graduates who are pursuing arts education. For real? That would be awesome. We exchanged contact information, and I promised to have Jasmine reach out with details. As I walked back to the foundation, Tanya's excitement stayed with me. Her journey from tentative student to confident artist embodied exactly what the Phoenix Foundation aimed to facilitate on a larger scale. The meeting with the marketing team went smoothly. They developed a compelling campaign to launch our programs centered around the theme Ignite Potential. The materials featured stories of young artists and the teachers who had believed in them, highlighting the transformative power of arts education. After everyone left for the day, I remained in the quiet office, reviewing our launch timeline. In just 2 weeks, we would officially announce the Phoenix Foundation to the public with a reception at Horizon Gallery in New York, featuring work from students in our partner schools. Seth found me there, gently suggesting it was time to go home. You've been at this for 14 hours, he pointed out. The foundation won't collapse if you take an evening off. I smiled, acknowledging he was right. Just one more email, I promised. The email was to Harrison Walsh, updating him on our progress and inviting him to the launch event. I felt he should be there. The bearer of the letter that had started this journey deserved to witness where it had led. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. The Vermont property renovations reached a milestone with the completion of the studio space, while the main retreat center continued on schedule for a summer opening. In Boston, our headquarters was fully operational, the team growing with the addition of 2 program officers and an administrative assistant. Daniel surprised me by offering to host a pre-launch dinner for key supporters at his home the night before the gallery reception. Victoria's on board, he assured me. She's even taking a cooking class for the occasion. The gesture touched me deeply, not just the practical support, but the public alignment with the Foundation's mission. It symbolized a bridge between our worlds that had seemed impossible a few months earlier. The evening of Daniel's dinner arrived, bringing together an eclectic group: arts administrators, educators, potential donors, and family friends. Victoria had transformed their formal dining room with creative touches, centerpieces featuring miniature easels holding menu cards hand-painted by her children, napkins folded into origami birds. Daniel called for everyone's attention as dessert was being served. I'd like to propose a toast, he said, raising his glass. To my sister, Olivia, whose vision for the Phoenix Foundation reminds us that true legacy isn't measured in dollars, but in lives transformed. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Our parents, he continued, his voice softening slightly, built their success in the business world. Olivia is building something different but equally valuable, creating pathways for young people to discover their own definitions of success. I blinked back unexpected tears, moved by this public acknowledgement from my brother. To the Phoenix, Daniel concluded. May it rise and illuminate. To the Phoenix, everyone echoed, glasses clinking. Later, as guests were departing, I found a quiet moment with Daniel in his study. "Thank you," I said simply. "Not just for tonight, but for everything these past months. Your support means more than you know." He nodded, looking slightly embarrassed by the sentiment. "I've been thinking a lot about what success really means," he admitted. "Watching you build this foundation, it's made me reconsider some things." "Like what?" He gestured vaguely. "Balance. Purpose. The kind of example I'm setting for my kids." He picked up a framed photo from his desk, his children at the lake house last summer. "I don't want them to think that the only achievements that matter come with dollar signs attached." "That's not what you believe," I said, surprised. "Isn't it?" he asked with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "It's certainly how I've lived. 60-hour weeks, missing soccer games for conference calls, measuring each year by bonuses and promotions. I considered this. It's never too late to expand the definition. That's what I'm trying to do," he said. "Starting with this foundation work. It feels different. Good different." The next morning, I woke early and sat by the window of my hotel room, watching New York City come alive 22 floors below. The gallery reception was scheduled for 7 that evening, with press interviews throughout the day. My outfit hung ready, a jewel-toned dress that projected confidence without corporate stiffness, paired with my grandmother's sapphire ring. I opened my laptop to review my remarks for the evening one last time. The speech had gone through multiple drafts, but the heart of it remained constant, a vision for arts education that went beyond enrichment to become a central pathway for developing creative thinkers, problem solvers, and engaged citizens. As I read through the carefully crafted paragraphs, I felt something was missing. I opened a new document and began typing freely, without concern for polished phrasing. The Phoenix Foundation was born from a revelation that what often looks like absence is actually presence in a different form. My parents couldn't find the words to express their belief in my path while they were alive. But in their own way, they were watching, noticing, valuing. Their legacy isn't just financial resources, it's the understanding that support comes in many forms, and recognition doesn't always look like we expect it to. This foundation aims to recognize potential in all its forms, from traditional artistic talent to innovative thinking that doesn't fit established categories. We want to be present for young people who might otherwise feel invisible, to validate paths that might otherwise seem impossible. The phoenix rises not despite the fire but because of it. Challenges can become catalysts. What seems like an ending can become a beginning. This is true for individuals, for families, for communities, for systems of education. I stopped writing, realizing I'd found what was missing, the personal heart of the mission, the emotional truth behind the strategic language. I would integrate elements of this raw draft into my formal remarks, bringing authenticity to balance. The necessary professionalism. The day unfolded according to plan: interviews with education reporters, meetings with potential partner organizations, a walkthrough of the gallery where student artwork was being installed alongside professional pieces. Diane had curated the exhibition masterfully, creating conversations between established and emerging artists that highlighted connections rather than disparities. By late afternoon, I returned to the hotel to prepare for the evening. As I dressed, I thought about the journey of the past months, from that shocking will reading to tonight's launch. So much had changed, not just externally but within me. I had discovered capacities I hadn't known I possessed, for leadership, for strategic thinking, for bridging different worlds. Seth met me in the lobby, handsome in a charcoal suit. "Ready to ignite some potential?" he asked with a smile, offering his arm. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, taking a deep breath. The gallery was transformed when we arrived, lighting perfectly adjusted to showcase the artwork, catering staff circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, the Phoenix Foundation logo projected elegantly on one wall. Diane greeted us warmly, introducing us to early arrivals, gallery patrons, arts journalists, education advocates. As 7 o'clock approached, the space filled with guests. I spotted Harrison Walsh speaking with Daniel and Victoria near the entrance. Jasmine was engaged in animated conversation with the superintendent of Boston Public Schools. Marcus efficiently directed the event staff while simultaneously charming potential donors. It was time. Diane clinked a glass to call for attention, then introduced me with genuine warmth. As I stepped forward to address the gathering, I felt a momentary flutter of nervousness, then a strange calm. These people were here because they believed in the power of arts education, in the value of creative expression, in the importance of making opportunity accessible. They were allies in the mission, not critics to be convinced. I began not with my prepared remarks but with a story about Tanya Washington, the former student I'd encountered outside my old apartment, and her journey from hesitant high school junior to confident college artist. I described how a single teacher's belief had helped her discover her own voice, and how that voice was now developing in ways that would enrich not just her life but the broader cultural conversation. This is what the Phoenix Foundation is about, I said, looking around the room. Not just supporting individual talent, though that matters deeply, but recognizing that creative expression and creative thinking are essential components of a complete education, a thriving community, and a just society. As I continued, weaving together the personal and the programmatic, I caught Daniel's eye across the room. He gave me a slight nod, a gesture of respect between equals that meant more than any effusive praise. The speech concluded to warm applause. As I stepped back, Diane advanced to unveil the exhibition, Emerging Visions, featuring work from students in our partner schools alongside established artists who had mentored them. The crowd dispersed to view the artwork, conversations bubbling throughout the gallery. I found myself approached by a steady stream of guests, educators interested in bringing Phoenix programs to their schools, artists offering to participate in residencies, potential donors asking thoughtful questions about our evaluation methods. Late in the evening, Harrison Walsh found me by a striking mixed-media piece created by a sophomore from Westside. "Your parents would be proud," he said simply. "Not just of the foundation, though it's impressive, but of how you've embraced their legacy while making it entirely your own." I considered this. I think they were always proud, in their way. They just didn't know how to show it. Perhaps, he agreed. But you're showing them now, through your actions. The best tribute isn't imitation but creative continuation. Creative continuation. The phrase resonated deeply. The Phoenix Foundation wasn't just about honoring my parents' intentions or utilizing their resources. It was about taking the seeds they had planted, often unknowingly, and cultivating something new, something that reflected both their values and my own vision. As the evening wound down, I found a quiet moment to stand alone before the Foundation's logo, the stylized phoenix with subtle gold leaf accents catching the light. In its rising form, I saw not just rebirth but integration, of past and future, of different approaches to value, of diverse pathways to meaningful contribution. The phoenix rises not despite the fire but because of it. The thought returned, more powerful than before. Sometimes what looks like an ending, a disappointing reading, a family rift, a seeming rejection, contains within it the seeds of a new beginning. My parents had given me more than money. They had given me the opportunity to transform understanding into action, to convert private revelation into public impact. Their final gift wasn't just financial security but the chance to create my own definition of legacy. As I turned to rejoin the remaining guests, I caught sight of my reflection in the gallery window, confident, purposeful, at peace with both where I had come from and where I was going. The journey wasn't complete, in many ways, it was just beginning. But I was ready for whatever came next, carrying forward not just resources but wisdom, not just opportunity but responsibility. The phoenix had risen. Now it was time to soar. 1 year after the Phoenix Foundation's launch, I stood at the edge of the lake on our Vermont property, watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant orange and gold. Behind me, laughter and conversation drifted from the main lodge where 30 high school arts teachers from underserved schools across New England were completing their 2-week summer residency. The transformation of the property had exceeded even my most ambitious visions. The main house had been expanded to accommodate up to 40 residents, with a communal dining hall featuring floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. The original studio had been renovated and equipped with professional-grade equipment for everything from traditional painting to digital media production. And we'd added 2 new structures, a performance space with exceptional acoustics and a technology center where teachers and students could explore the intersection of arts and innovation. "Penny for your thoughts," said a voice behind me. I turned to see Elaine Donovan, the trust manager who had first explained the Phoenix Trust to me. Now a trusted advisor and foundation board member, she had arrived that morning for our annual strategic planning retreat. "Just reflecting on how much has happened in a year," I replied, making room for her on the weathered wooden bench. "It's been remarkable," she agreed. "Your father would have appreciated the return on investment." I smiled. "The financial ROI or the social impact ROI?" "Both." She gestured toward the lodge. 30 teachers who will return to their schools energized and equipped with new approaches, who will influence hundreds of students each year. That's exponential impact. That's the hope. The Phoenix Teacher Institute had become our flagship program, providing intensive professional development for arts educators working in under-resourced schools. Beyond technical skills and curricular resources, the program emphasized advocacy strategies, community engagement, and interdisciplinary approaches that positioned arts education as central rather than peripheral to student development. The Board report looks excellent, Elaine said. Especially the evaluation data from the first cohort. 92% reporting significant changes in their teaching practice, 87% securing increased resources at their schools. The numbers are encouraging, I acknowledged. But it's the stories that really matter to me. Like Thomas Jefferson Middle School in Roxbury, where a teacher from our first cohort had transformed a storage closet into a digital recording studio, creating a space where students produced podcasts about community issues. Or Westside High, where our pilot program had expanded to include an artist-in-residence program that brought professional artists into classrooms 3 days a week. Speaking of stories, Elaine said, have you decided about the memoir offer? A major publisher had approached me about writing a book about the Foundation's origin story and philosophy. The advance would go directly to the Foundation, and the book would raise our national profile. I'm leaning toward yes, but with conditions. It can't just be about me or my family. It needs to center the educators and students doing the real work. Elaine nodded approvingly. A wise approach. Authentic to your values. As twilight deepened, we walked back to the lodge together. Inside, the atmosphere was vibrant with creative energy. Teachers from diverse backgrounds and disciplines were sharing meals, swapping classroom strategies, and forging connections that would extend beyond the residency. In the main hall, a spontaneous collaboration had emerged, a music teacher from Hartford improvising on the piano while a dance instructor from Providence created movement in response. Around them, other teachers had gathered, some recording on phones, others sketching the scene, all fully engaged in the moment. Marcus, now our director of operations, appeared at my side with a tablet displaying tomorrow's schedule. The documentary crew arrives at 9, he reminded me. They want to film the morning workshop and do your interview by the lake if weather permits. A PBS station was producing a feature on innovative approaches to arts education, with the Phoenix Foundation as a central case study. The national exposure would help us attract additional funding partners as we look to expand beyond New England. Perfect, I replied, scanning the rest of the schedule. And the board meeting is still at 2? Yes, in the conference room. Full agenda but should wrap by 5, in time for the showcase. The teacher residency would culminate tomorrow evening with a showcase of work created during their time at the retreat, everything from traditional art to digital media to collaborative performances. Local community members would be invited, creating connections between the Foundation and our Vermont neighbors. You've built something extraordinary here, Elaine commented as we watched the impromptu performance continue. We've built it, I corrected gently. This has never been a solo endeavor. The Foundation team had grown to 15 full-time staff, with a network of consultants, teaching artists, and volunteers extending our reach. Seth had officially joined as Director of Creative Spaces, overseeing the design and implementation of arts facilities in partner schools while maintaining his own architectural practice part-time. And Daniel had become an unexpected ally, leveraging his business connections to secure corporate sponsorships and serving as a passionate advocate in circles I couldn't access. Just last month, he'd convinced his company's foundation to fund a 3-year initiative bringing arts programming to after-school centers in low-income neighborhoods. That night, I sat on the porch of the small cabin Seth and I used when visiting the property. The main lodge was reserved for program participants, part of our commitment to creating an immersive, retreat-like experience for educators who rarely received such affirmation of their professional value. I opened my laptop to review my notes. For tomorrow's board meeting, the Foundation was at an inflection point, having established proof of concept through our New England programs. The question now was how to grow our impact without losing the personal touch and responsive approach that had made our initial efforts successful. My phone buzzed with a text from Tanya Washington, the former student who is now part of our college mentorship program. Just got the internship at MoMA. Thank you for the recommendation? I smiled, typing back congratulations. Tanya's trajectory from hesitant high school student to confident young professional embodied exactly what the Phoenix Foundation aimed to facilitate, not just technical skills or career advancement, but a fundamental belief in one's creative voice and its value in the world. My phone buzzed again, this time Daniel. Just landed in Burlington. Victoria sends love. Kids excited for Camp with Aunt Liv tomorrow. Daniel and his family were spending the weekend at the property after the board meeting. His children, now 8 and 10, would participate in a family arts program we developed, while he and Victoria joined the community showcase event. It was a small thing, perhaps, but significant, my brother choosing to integrate this part of my world into his family's experience, recognizing its value not just as my work but as something meaningful for his children. The next morning dawned. Clear and bright, perfect for the documentary crew's planned filming. I met them at the main entrance, where the Phoenix Foundation logo, that stylized bird rising in gold and amber, caught the morning light. The producer, Gabriela Martinez, shook my hand warmly. Thank you for allowing us this access. What you're building here is exactly the kind of innovative approach our series aims to highlight. We're honored to be included, I replied. Though I hope you'll focus primarily on the teachers and their work, not just on me or the foundation's structure. Absolutely, she agreed. We want to show the ecosystem you're creating, how the different elements work together to elevate arts education. We began with filming the morning workshop, a session on integrating digital storytelling across the curriculum, led by a renowned documentary filmmaker. The teachers were fully engaged, experimenting with simple tools that could be implemented even in schools with limited technology resources. Later, as promised, Gabriela interviewed me. By the lake, the mountains providing a stunning backdrop. Her questions were thoughtful, focusing on the philosophy behind our programs rather than just the logistics or funding. You've taken a somewhat unconventional approach, she noted. Rather than simply providing grants to existing programs, you've created this immersive professional development model. Why? I considered my response carefully. Money alone doesn't solve systemic problems. We could fund new equipment or temporary programs, but without investing in the educators themselves, their skills, their confidence, their capacity to advocate, the impact would be limited and likely temporary. And the retreat setting? That seems like a luxury in educational professional development. I smiled. It's intentional. Teachers, especially arts teachers, are often marginalized within their schools. Their subjects are treated as extras, their expertise undervalued. Bringing them to this beautiful space, providing exceptional accommodations and experiences, it's a tangible statement about how much we value them and their work. The interview continued, touching on our evaluation methods, expansion plans, and the broader context of arts education funding nationwide. Throughout, I tried to balance professional expertise with personal passion, knowing that both were essential to communicating our mission effectively. One last question, Gabriela said as we concluded. This foundation emerged from a very personal story, your parents' unexpected bequest. How has that origin influenced your approach to philanthropy? I looked out over the lake, gathering my thoughts. It's taught me that legacy isn't just about money or buildings or even programs. It's about recognizing value in unexpected places. About seeing potential that others might miss. My parents saw something in me that I didn't fully see in myself. Now, through this foundation, we're trying to create systems that see potential in students and teachers who might otherwise be overlooked. After the interview, I headed to the conference center for our board meeting. The Phoenix Foundation board was intentionally diverse: educators, artists, business leaders, community representatives, and philanthropic professionals. Daniel had joined 6 months ago, bringing valuable financial oversight experience along with his growing passion for our mission. The meeting began with program updates from Jasmine, who had been promoted to Director of Educational Initiatives. Her presentation highlighted both successes and challenges from our first full year of operations. The data tells a compelling story, she concluded. But what numbers can't capture is the cultural shift happening in our partner schools. Arts education is moving from the margins to the center, from nice to have to essential component. That's the real transformation we're after. The financial report came next, delivered by our CFO, a former investment banker who had left Wall Street to apply his skills in the nonprofit sector. The foundation was in an exceptionally strong position, with the endowment growing and operational costs well managed. The question before us, he said, is how to balance prudent fiscal management with ambitious impact. We have the capacity to expand significantly, but strategic growth requires careful planning. The discussion that followed was rich and nuanced. Board members brought diverse perspectives on how to scale our work, geographically, programmatically, and through policy influence. By meeting's end, we had approved a 3-year expansion plan that would extend our Teacher Institute model to 3 additional regions while deepening our work in New England. As board members dispersed to tour the property before the evening showcase, Daniel lingered behind. That was impressive, he said, gathering his notes. The level of strategic thinking, the focus on measurable outcomes while not losing sight of the human impact. It's not what people expect from arts organizations. We're trying to change those expectations, I replied. Arts education isn't just about self-expression or cultural enrichment, though those matter deeply. It's about developing creative thinking, collaborative skills, perseverance, capacities that translate across domains. He nodded thoughtfully. You know, I used that exact argument last month when speaking to my company's executive committee about increasing our foundation's arts funding. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have understood it myself. Now I'm advocating for it. This evolution in Daniel's thinking was perhaps the most unexpected outcome of the past year. The brother who had once measured success exclusively in financial terms was now championing the intrinsic and instrumental value of arts education. Victoria and the kids just arrived, he added, checking his phone. Mind if I skip the property tour to get them settled? Of course not. The family cabin is ready for you, kitchen stocked, extra towels in the closet. The kids' workshop starts at 4 if they want to participate before the showcase. He paused at the door. Liv, Mom and Dad would be amazed by what you've created here. I know I am. The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected emotion. Our relationship had healed significantly over the past year, but moments of direct affirmation were still rare between us. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. The evening showcase exceeded all expectations. The lodge's performance space was transformed, with teacher-created artwork displayed gallery-style along the perimeter and the central area arranged for performances and presentations. Community members from surrounding towns arrived, curious about the foundation that had brought new energy to the property. Local officials came too, recognizing the economic and cultural benefits our presence brought to the region. One by one, teachers shared what they had created during the residency, multimedia presentations, collaborative performances, teaching resources they would implement in their classrooms. The quality was exceptional, but even more striking was the confidence with which these educators presented their work, the professional pride evident in their demeanor. Midway through the showcase, a music teacher from a struggling rural district in Maine approached the microphone. Before I share my project, I want to say something about what this experience has meant to me. The room quieted. For 15 years, I've taught in a school where the arts are the first thing cut when budgets tighten. I've supplied my own materials, fought for every minute of instruction time, struggled to show administrators why music matters for our students. Most days, it feels like pushing a boulder uphill. Nods of recognition rippled through the audience of fellow teachers. Coming here, being treated as a professional with expertise worth developing, being given time and space and resources to create, connecting with others who understand the challenges, it's been transformative. For the first time in years, I remember why I chose this path. I'm returning to my school not just with new skills but with renewed purpose and the knowledge that I'm part of something larger than my classroom. Spontaneous applause erupted. I glanced at Daniel and Victoria, seated with their children in the second row. Victoria was wiping away tears, while Daniel listened with unusual intensity. After the formal presentations concluded, the event transitioned to a reception where conversations flowed between teachers, community members, foundation staff, and board members. The atmosphere hummed with energy and possibility. Seth found me by the refreshment table, slipping an arm around my waist. Successful night, he murmured. Look at these connections happening. All around us, people were exchanging contact information, making plans for collaboration, building professional networks that would extend beyond this evening. It's everything we hoped for, I agreed. Later, as the event wound down, I found a quiet moment to step outside onto the lodge's wide porch. The night was clear, stars brilliant above the mountains, a crescent moon casting silver light on the lake below. Harrison Walsh joined me there, leaning against the railing. Remarkable what you've accomplished in just 1 year, he said. It's been a team effort, I replied, the response now automatic. He smiled. Of course. But vision begins with an individual, even when execution requires many hands. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking out at the landscape my parents had loved, now reimagined as a space for creativity and transformation. I've been meaning to give you something, Harrison said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He withdrew a small envelope, yellowed with age. I found this when cleaning out some old files. It was with your parents' original will, though not part of the legal document. I accepted the envelope with curiosity. My name was written on the front in my father's distinctive handwriting. Thank you, I said, tucking it into my pocket. Whatever it contained, I wanted to read it privately. Harrison nodded understanding. Your parents were complex people, he said. They didn't always express themselves well in words or actions. But they saw more than they let on. After the last guests departed and the staff began cleanup, I walked back to the cabin Seth and I shared. He had stayed behind to help with final arrangements, giving me a moment alone. Sitting on the porch steps, I carefully opened the envelope Harrison had given me. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a brief note written in my father's hand, dated just a few weeks before the accident. Olivia, we've taken too long to say what matters. The trust is set. The letter explains our thinking. But some things should be said directly, not left to legal documents. You chose a different path than we imagined for you. It took us too long to see its value. But we do see it now. Your work matters. The way you teach, the way you create space for others to discover their voices, it matters profoundly. The resources we've set aside aren't a consolation prize. They're an investment in your vision, which has always been clearer than ours in certain ways. We're proud of you. We should have said it sooner. Dad, I read the note twice, then held it against my heart, tears flowing freely. This simple acknowledgement, direct, unambiguous, was the conversation we never had the chance to have. The next morning, the teacher residency concluded with a closing circle on the lawn overlooking the lake. Each participant shared one insight they were taking back to their classroom, one commitment they were making to themselves and their students. A visual arts teacher from an urban high school spoke last. I came here feeling isolated, the only art teacher in my school, constantly justifying my program's existence. I'm leaving as part of a community, with resources, strategies, and colleagues I can call on. But most importantly, I'm leaving with a renewed conviction that what we do isn't peripheral, it's essential. Our students need creative expression. Not as a luxury but as a necessity, especially those facing the greatest challenges. Art creates windows where there seem to be only walls, she continued. It builds bridges across differences. It helps us imagine possibilities beyond current realities. These aren't just poetic metaphors, they're practical tools for navigating an increasingly complex world. As the teachers departed, I stood with the foundation team, waving goodbye to buses and cars pulling down the long driveway. The property would welcome a new group next week, student leaders participating in an arts-based social change program, but for now, there was a moment to breathe, to reflect. We did it, Jasmine said, satisfaction evident in her voice. First full-scale Teacher Institute, exactly as we envisioned. Even better, Seth added. The collaborations that emerged organically, the community connections, those weren't in the original plan. I nodded agreement. The best plans leave room for unexpected growth. Later that day, after debriefing with the team, I found myself drawn back to the lake. Daniel and his family had departed that morning, but not before his children had proudly shown me the stop-motion animation they'd created in the workshop, their excitement about art refreshingly uncomplicated. Sitting on the dock, feet dangling above the clear water, I reread my father's note. The paper had already taken on the soft quality of something handled often, though I'd only received it yesterday. Your vision has always been clearer than ours in certain ways. Had it been? I wasn't sure. What I did know was that vision evolves, clarifies through action, strengthens through collaboration. The Phoenix Foundation's vision wasn't just mine anymore, it had been enriched by every teacher, student, staff member, and partner who had contributed their perspective and expertise. A year ago, standing in that conference room as the will was read, I could never have imagined this outcome. The apparent rejection had opened a door to understanding, to purpose, to impact beyond what would have been possible otherwise. The Phoenix continues to rise not despite challenges but because of them. The Foundation's work embodied this principle, helping educators and students transform limitations into creative opportunities, using constraints as catalysts rather than barriers. I tucked the note carefully back into my pocket and stood, looking out over the lake to the mountains beyond. The journey wasn't complete, in many ways, it was just beginning. But the path ahead felt clear, not despite the complexities but because we had embraced them, learning to navigate with purpose and perseverance. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of amber and gold, Phoenix colors, I thought with a smile. A fitting reminder that endings and beginnings are often the same moment viewed from different perspectives. I turned back toward the lodge, where lights were coming on as evening approached. There was work still to be done, plans to refine, challenges to address. But for now, in this moment, I allowed myself to simply appreciate how far we had come. And the unexpected gifts that had made the journey possible. The greatest inheritance wasn't the money or property. It was the opportunity to create meaning, to build bridges, to transform understanding into action. It was the chance to define legacy not as what is left behind but as what is carried forward. And we were just getting started. 5 years had passed since that life-changing will reading. The Phoenix Foundation had evolved from a promising startup into a nationally recognized leader in arts education innovation. What began as a personal journey of discovery had transformed into a movement that was reshaping how creativity was valued and nurtured in schools across the country. Today, I stood in the gleaming lobby of our new national headquarters in Boston, a renovated warehouse in the city's arts district that now housed our expanded team of 40 full-time staff. The space embodied our philosophy, open and collaborative, with studios where teaching artists developed curriculum, galleries showcasing student work, and a state-of-the-art performance venue where we hosted professional development workshops and community events. Ms. Mitchell? The CNN crew is ready for you in the interview space, said Zoe, our communications director. At 26, she represented the next generation of leadership we were cultivating, brilliant, passionate, and committed to our mission of democratizing access to arts education. Thanks, Zoe. And please, for the 100th time, call me Olivia. I said with a smile. She grinned. Professional habit. This is a big one, national coverage of the federal policy initiative. The initiative was our most ambitious undertaking yet. After years of building successful programs and gathering compelling data, we had partnered with a coalition of education organizations to propose comprehensive federal legislation that would establish arts education as a core component of public education, with dedicated funding streams and accountability measures. The CNN feature would introduce our work to millions of viewers who might never have considered the critical role of arts in developing essential life and career skills. The timing was perfect. Our recently published 5-year impact study had documented significant improvements in academic performance, attendance, and social-emotional development among students in Phoenix partner schools. I followed Zoe to our media room, where lights, cameras, and a backdrop featuring student artwork had been arranged. The reporter, Amara Chen, had a reputation for thoughtful coverage of education issues. She greeted me warmly as the technicians adjusted my microphone. We'll start with your personal story, she explained, then move to the foundation's work, and end with the policy initiative. Just be yourself, your passion for this work comes through naturally. The red light blinked on, and Amara turned to the camera. 5 years ago, Olivia Mitchell experienced what many would consider a painful rejection, being virtually written out of her parents' will while her brother received nearly everything. Today, that moment has transformed into a catalyst for national change in how we approach arts education. Olivia, tell us how this journey began. I'd told this story many times now, but always felt its significance freshly. What appeared to be an ending turned out to be a beginning, I explained. My parents had created a separate trust that revealed they valued my path more deeply than I'd realized. That revelation inspired me to create the Phoenix Foundation, named for the mythical bird that rises from ashes to new life. And rise it has, Amara commented. Your programs now reach over 200 schools in 15 states. What makes your approach different from traditional arts funding? We don't just provide resources, we transform systems, I explained. Traditional funding often creates temporary programs that disappear when the money runs out. We work with schools and communities to integrate arts education into their core identity and operations, creating sustainable change. The interview continued, covering our teacher institutes, student leadership programs, and community engagement initiatives. Throughout, I emphasized that our work wasn't about creating more professional artists, though that happened, but about developing creative capacity in all students. Creativity isn't a luxury skill for certain careers, I said. It's an essential capacity for solving complex problems, adapting to change, and imagining new possibilities. These are capabilities every child needs, regardless of their career path. When the cameras stopped rolling, Amara thanked me. That was excellent. Your brother is joining us tomorrow for the economic impact segment, correct? I nodded, still somewhat amazed by this development. Yes, Daniel will speak about the business community's growing recognition that arts education develops the innovative thinking they need in their workforce. After the CNN team departed, I checked my watch. Just enough time to review the quarterly program data before my next meeting. I headed to my office, a glass-walled space that reflected my commitment to transparent leadership. Unlike traditional executive offices, mine was positioned in the heart of our open floor plan, accessible to staff and visitors alike. On my desk sat a framed photograph, my parents on their 30th anniversary, smiling from the deck of the Vermont property that now served as our flagship retreat center. Beside it was a small painting by Tanya Washington, that former student who had once doubted her talent. Now completing her MFA at Yale, she credited the Phoenix College Scholars Program, which provided mentorship and financial support to promising young artists from underserved communities, with making her education possible. Jasmine knocked on my open door, tablet in hand. Data looks strong across all program areas, she reported, taking a seat. Now our executive director of programs, she oversaw our expanding portfolio of initiatives with exceptional skill. The teacher retention numbers are especially significant, she continued. 92% of educators who completed our institute are still teaching 3 years later, compared to the national average of 70%. In high-poverty districts, the difference is even more dramatic. That's exactly what policymakers need to hear, I noted. Teacher turnover costs districts billions annually. If our approach helps keep talented educators in the classroom, that's a financial argument as well as an educational one. Jasmine nodded. The whole school data is compelling too. Partner schools are reporting fewer disciplinary issues, higher attendance rates, and improved performance across subject areas. Have we disaggregated the data by student demographics? Yes, the impact is particularly strong for students from low-income backgrounds and English language learners. The equity implications are powerful. This was the heart of our mission, not just improving arts education generally, but ensuring that its benefits reached students who had historically been denied access to quality creative learning experiences. Our conversation was interrupted by a text from Seth, just landed. Heading to the school now. Can't wait to show you what these kids have created. Seth was returning from Los Angeles, where he had been overseeing the transformation of an abandoned warehouse into an arts center, serving 5 schools in a low-income neighborhood. The project exemplified our expanded approach, creating shared creative spaces that served multiple schools and community organizations, maximizing impact and sustainability. Seth's back, I told Jasmine with a smile. We should wrap up anyway. You have the policy call at 3, right? Yes, with the congressional staffers. Daniel's team sent over the economic impact data this morning. It's impressive. Corporations are finally seeing the connection between arts education and the innovative workforce they need. My brother's evolution over these 5 years had been remarkable. From initial skepticism about the foundation's work, he had become one of our most effective advocates in the business community. His company had established a corporate responsibility initiative that supported arts education nationwide, and he frequently spoke at business forums about the economic case for creativity. After Jasmine left, I reviewed my schedule for the remainder of the day. A video call with our regional directors at 4, dinner with potential major donors at 7, and in between, the part of my work I valued most, a visit to Westside High School, where it had all begun. Westside had been our first partner school and remained a living laboratory for our approaches. The transformation there had been profound, from a school where arts were marginalized to one where creative learning was woven throughout the curriculum. The formerly bare hallways now showcased student artwork that changed quarterly. The converted storage closet that once served as the art room had expanded to a suite of specialized studios. Most importantly, the school culture had shifted from test-focused compliance to creative engagement. I drove to Westside, memories flooding back of my teaching days. The security guard at the entrance greeted me by name. I was still a familiar presence here, despite my expanded role. Seth's already in the media lab, he informed me with a smile. Those kids have been bouncing off the walls waiting to show you their project. The media lab, once a half-abandoned computer room with outdated equipment, was now a vibrant creative technology center where students learned everything from digital photography to coding to 3D design. The transformation had been funded through our Innovative Spaces initiative, which helped schools reimagine underutilized areas as creative learning environments. I found Seth surrounded by a group of excited 10th graders, all talking at once as they showed him their interactive digital mural. The wall-sized touchscreen displayed a collage of neighborhood images that, when touched, revealed oral histories, music, poetry, and documentary footage created by the students. "Ms. Mitchell," exclaimed DeAndre, a student I'd known since he was in 7th grade. "You gotta see what happens when you touch the community center part." I followed his instruction, pressing the image of a local community center. It expanded to reveal a virtual gallery of portraits, elders from the neighborhood, each with an accompanying audio story told in their own voices. "This is extraordinary," I said, genuinely impressed. "How did you gather all these stories?" "We did interviews every Wednesday after school for 2 months, explained Lucia, another student. At first people were shy, but then everybody wanted to be included. We have over 50 stories now. And the best part," added DeAndre, "is that it's not just staying here in the school. The community center is installing a version next month. And the City Historical Society wants to archive the whole project." This was exactly what we had envisioned, arts education that extended beyond classroom walls to connect with communities, creating meaningful work that had real-world relevance. Seth caught my eye across the room, his expression mirroring my pride in these students' accomplishments. After a decade together, we had married 3 years ago in a ceremony at the Vermont Retreat Center. We could communicate volumes in a single glance. "We have one more surprise," announced Ms. Washington, the media arts teacher who had been with the program since its inception. "Students, show Ms. Mitchell the expansion plan." The screen changed to display architectural renderings of an expanded media lab, with additional equipment, flexible seating arrangements, and a small recording studio. "We applied for a city arts grant," Lucia explained proudly. "And we got it." $75,000 to expand the lab and open it to the community after school hours. This was new information, a perfect example of the sustainable impact we aimed for. These students hadn't just participated in a program. They had developed the skills and confidence to secure resources for its continuation and expansion. That's the real success, Seth said quietly as the students continued their enthusiastic explanations. They don't see themselves as recipients of a program anymore. They see themselves as creators and leaders. After spending an hour with the students, we reluctantly departed for our next commitments. In the car, Seth updated me on the Los Angeles project while I shared details about the upcoming policy initiative launch. It's hard to believe how far we've come in 5 years, he reflected. Remember when the foundation was just the two of us working out of your apartment, with Jasmine part-time? I smiled at the memory. And now we're advocating for federal legislation. It's been quite a journey. Speaking of journeys, Seth said, I had an interesting conversation with Daniel yesterday. He's considering a significant career change. This was surprising news. My brother had always seemed the embodiment of corporate ambition. What kind of change? He's been offered a position leading a major foundation focused on workforce development. He'd be responsible for their education and training initiatives nationwide. I absorbed this information. That's unexpected. But it makes sense, in a way. He's become increasingly engaged with our work over the years. He said something that stuck with me, Seth continued. He said watching you build the Phoenix Foundation made him reconsider what legacy really means, that he wants his career to be about more than financial success. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had felt like the family disappointment for choosing purpose over profit. Now, my brother was considering a similar pivot. That evening's dinner with potential donors was held at a restaurant owned by a former Phoenix scholar, a young woman who had participated in our culinary arts program before attending culinary school and eventually opening her own farm-to-table establishment. Her success story embodied our broad definition of creative education, which encompassed culinary arts, design, media, and other fields not traditionally included in school arts programs. The potential donors were a diverse group, a tech entrepreneur interested in creative learning, a family foundation focused on educational equity, and several individual philanthropists who had heard about our work through the growing national attention. As we shared stories of impact and outlined our vision for the future, I was struck by how naturally the conversation flowed. 5 years ago, explaining the importance of arts education had felt like pushing against a strong current of skepticism. Now, with compelling data and visible results, the case made itself. What I find most impressive, said the tech entrepreneur, is how you've managed to quantify the seemingly unquantifiable. You've demonstrated that creativity isn't just a nice addition to education, it's a core driver of the outcomes we all care about. That's been intentional, I explained. We believe deeply in the intrinsic value of the arts. But we also recognize that in a data-driven educational environment, we need to speak the language of outcomes and impact. By the end of the evening, all 3 potential donors had committed to supporting different aspects of our work, the tech entrepreneur funding a digital arts initiative, the Family Foundation supporting our Teacher Institute expansion, and the individual donors contributing to our scholarship program. The next morning brought another significant milestone, the official launch of our policy initiative at a press conference at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. I couldn't attend in person due to commitments in Boston, but I watched the live stream from my office, surrounded by staff. Daniel represented the foundation flawlessly, speaking eloquently about the economic imperatives for arts education. He was followed by congressional sponsors of the legislation, education leaders from partner organizations, and, most powerfully, students and teachers whose lives had been transformed through our programs. One teacher's testimony particularly moved me, a veteran educator from rural Mississippi who had been on the verge of leaving the profession before participating in our institute. I had lost my sense of purpose, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion visible on her face. Teaching had become about test preparation and compliance. The Phoenix Institute reminded me why I became a teacher in the first place. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload. From us,